Doctors of Reddit, what's something someone came to the hospital for that they thought wasn't a big deal but turned out to be much worse? Had a guy come in complaining of a cough and difficulty swallowing. He thought he had tonsillitis and just wanted some antibiotics. I noticed his voice was incredibly hoarse but there were no swollen tonsils, so sent him for a chest x-ray. Huge, baseball-sized tumors all throughout his lungs. One of them was pressing on the recurrent laryngeal nerve, causing his speaking and swallowing problems. He died within a week. Well, this thread is terrifying. My best friend's sister went to the hospital for what she thought was a lingering flu. She walked out with a diagnosis of bowel, stomach and liver cancer and died 9 months later. My dad went into the hospital in some pain. Back when he used to power lift, a nurse comes into the room, looks down at her chart, looks back up and says, "Mr. Pickle, you are having a heart attack." He got up on the bed and flexed, saying, "Does this look like a man that's having a heart attack to you?" She looked back down at her chart, up again, and says, "Yes. Sir, this is a no flex zone." Not a doctor, I'm an EMT, but when I was deployed to Afghanistan as a medic, a medevac pilot came in because he had a small abnormality on his flight physical EKG. Apparently this was something he had been getting waivers for years for. I had just finished an A&P class and learned about something called Brugada syndrome, which is basically an arrhythmia that causes sudden cardiac death in the patient. I jokingly mentioned how his EKG reminded me of the abnormality I saw in my textbook, thinking there was no way he actually had it and it had to be artifact from the EKG. The doctor's eyes widened and he sprinted out of the office. The pilot had it, was immediately relieved of flight duty, sent home and had a defibrillator put into his heart before being medically retired. Good for you, you saved his life. My sister-in-law thought she had a cyst on her shoulder. Nope, round cell sarcoma. The doctors said she had 2 months. She lived for 8. When I was doing my hospital placements, a patient came in laughing and skipping for their scan. They thought 100% they were in remission and clear of cancer growth. I was spending a day with the scan techs and sat in. The scan didn't show one tumor, it showed hundreds. The guy was riddled with metastases. It was terminal. He had months. He was laughing and smiling with us. He asked if we could tell him how it went, and the tech said we couldn't. It was for the doctor. The old man winked at us and walked out. He was so happy. It was one of the days that told me I couldn't do that job. My mother woke up one day and her arm was numb. After about 45 minutes it was still pretty numb and she thought she had pinched a nerve in it sleeping, but went to the ER just in case. She had a stroke, which actually was caused by a blood clot, which moved up from her heart and exited a hole in her heart. A congenital defect she was unaware she had. She ended up fine and feeling in her arm came back, but she was incredibly lucky that it did. When I was 12 I had a crazy bad headache that wouldn't go away. My dad brought me to the doc and I didn't even make it to the exam room before they turned me back and sent us to the hospital. It turns out my headache was from a burst sinus cavity, as in all the bones around my eye broke and the liquid leaked back onto my brain, giving me brain meningitis. My eye was bulging out to the point where I looked like an alien and they told my parents I was not going to make it. Obviously I pulled through but was hospitalized for 2 weeks and missed 2 months of school. I was at the time only the 3rd known case of this happening and they had flown in doctors from all over the US and from the UK. Crazy stuff. I thought it was just the worst headache. Turned out to be so much more. The 7th of December, 2012. We brought my father-in-law to the ER because he just wasn't acting right, mixing words, feeling tired. My husband and I thought for sure he had a mild stroke. The ER staff thought he had a stroke too, because of his symptoms, and he was 79. They did a scan and nope, cancer. 3 huge tumors in his brain. We took him for more tests the next day and it was lung cancer. A tiny spot in his lung that traveled to his brain. He died 13 days later, on my husband's birthday. I'm a nurse. I cared for a patient that came in because she woke up with a severe headache and a knot on her head. She went to CT for a head scan and had 2 bullets in her head. One had gone in at the top of her head, just past her hairline and traveled under the skin, but on top of her skull to the back of her head. The other went straight in, but just fractured the skull behind her ear, didn't go all the way through the skull. They were smaller caliber bullets. Apparently, she went to sleep the night before after taking an Ambien and there was a drive-by shooting on her street. The bullets went through her window and she slept right through it. Note to self, never take Ambien, you will go into a freaking coma. Patient presented with a small, less than 1 inch, scratch on his right thigh and severe pain and immobility. On palpation there was crepitus, a cracking sound. We called in a surgeon in the hopes that we could excise the closed wound, but as soon as the surgeon cut the skin the leg deflated. Yes, deflated. The escaped air was horribly putrid in odor. We ordered an x-ray and discovered the leg was simply skin and bones without any signs of muscle. I regretfully informed the patient that we had a strong suspicion of a flesh-eating bacteria called Clostridium perfringens and that the infection was spreading fast. He called his family and loved ones, got a lawyer and said his goodbyes. 12 hours after admission he was declared dead. Where is this bacteria commonly located? My friend's mother was on vacation in Key West and as they were walking down the beach her husband pointed out that the toes on her left foot were all sandy and the other one wasn't. She had been kind of dragging the front of her foot, but only on the one leg. The mom vaguely mentioned that she'd been kind of having a little trouble lifting the front of her foot up, but figured she just strained something from running barefoot on the beach a few days earlier. She went to a doctor to see if she could get some anti-inflammatories. After questions and recommendations to see a specialist, they figured out that she has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. This was 6 years ago. Now she is totally unable to move, talk, and breath on her own. All she thought she had was a sprained foot. I thought I had a nasty flu strain, was feeling generally like crap, didn't go to hospital until 2 days later, was in operating room less than an hour after that. Appendicitis. Appendicitis is evil. I thought I had food poisoning. I was in a fender bender car accident. I was at fault and my lower back would not stop aching. I went into the OR figuring I had sprained the muscles in my back and that I would be prescribed muscle relaxers and maybe some pain pills. 6 hours, several x-rays, a CAT scan and 4 doctors later, I found out my spine was broken and, get this, healed. The best theory any of them could come up with was that my spine had broken during birth and since we never knew, it just healed itself, filling in with cartilage. One of the docs told me that had we known my spine broke at birth I would have likely never walked and would have been treated as handicapped my whole life. I didn't find out until I was 20 and already had a child. My mom cried because she always thought I was just a really colicky baby, when in fact I was probably in a lot of pain. That's really sad and terrifying. Parental guilt is horrible. Paramedic here. We got called out one Christmas for a grandfather who was tired after eating a huge turkey dinner. We get there and the first responders are standing around outside in high spirits. I walk in, slap a EKG on him. Massive MI, heart attack. Went from happy turkey coma to heart attack in 3 seconds. Frick it, if I'm going to die, let it be after a fantastic Thanksgiving dinner. This one isn't nearly as scary as the others, and I'm pretty late to the party, but here's my story. I have male pattern baldness, and needed a prescription for some hair growth medication from a dermatologist. The doctor said he would give me a prescription, but first wanted to do a full skin checkup, which he does for every new patient. I got annoyed by the fact that I had to strip naked in front of this guy just for hair medicine. A few weeks later I get a call. There was melanoma cancer on my back. They caught it early enough that it hadn't spread. That checkup saved my life. Doctors of Reddit scare the crap out of me. This is like the web of Reddit. A year or 2 ago here in Texas a woman went to her optometrist for a regular exam. She later told the news after a long silence he asks, "Did you drive here? Number. The person who drove you here needs to drive you to a hospital immediately. Why? Because you're about to have a stroke." That's amazing but also scary as heck. Imagine knowing the entire way to the hospital. My doctor told me if I had waited 12 more hours I probably would have died. So I was taking antibiotics for dental work that had been done, and noticed these weird blisters showing up everywhere. Weird, but whatever. 48 hours later, they started opening up, leaving holes in my skin. No blood, just lost most of the skin in that area. Again, weird, but I was working so whatever. Then they started appearing in my throat, so I got to the hospital ASAP and was diagnosed immediately with Steven Johnson syndrome. Any longer and the layers of my skin would have literally peeled away from each other and I would have died. That was a sobering day. After I got my appendix out, I went back a week later thinking I was constipated. Nope. I had a giant ass abscess that had started to wall itself off. They went in the drain it and I woke up in ICU 5 days later recovering from sepsis, septic shock and kidney failure. She thought she had pneumonia. Turns out it was stage 4 lung cancer. She was 31. For instance, I thought I had food poisoning. Then they emergency took out my appendix at 1 AM. I saw a 55-ish woman at the ER last year. She asks us if she might have something wrong with her breast. During my exam, I couldn't help but notice that her left breast was bumpy, talking like 5 centimeters mass protruding. The nipple was inverted and leaking blood. Clearly a textbook case of cancer. The woman had a pretty high-paying job and seemed pretty smart, and was clearly in denial. I had gallstones for 3 years or so before I finally got my gallbladder ripped out last year. At its worst, I was getting an attack maybe once a month or so I figured it couldn't be that bad. I went to the surgeon for my post-op checkup. He told me that my gallbladder was filled with hundreds of stones of varying sizes and that it was precancerous. Apparently, people don't typically get gallbladder cancer until they are in their 80s or 90s, and it is often very serious because people don't catch it right away. I'm in my 20s and like I said, I had been sitting on this problem for 3 years before I finally toughened up enough to get it checked out. Scary crap, man. My girlfriend is in her final rotations for radiology. A while back a young girl came in after winning a basketball championship. She had some shooting shin pain but wasn't in a lot of pain. Still glowing from the win and talking excitedly about a scholarship offer. When her scan came back, about 60% of the marrow in her tibia was one big sarcoma. Cancer. Surgery and therapy essentially ended her shot at a full ride. I'm not a doctor, but a few years ago I took a positive pregnancy test. I went to the doctor to confirm, just thinking I would be getting some blood work done and maybe an ultrasound. They did the ultrasound but couldn't find a baby in my uterus, so they told me it was ectopic, implanted in a fallopian tube, and I needed to have surgery to remove the baby. I went into surgery and woke up a few hours later. The first thing I remember is seeing my parents and my fiance crying. Turns out I was never pregnant. I actually had a tumor the size of my fist on my ovary and my body was reacting to it like a baby. I had an HCG hormone and everything. I'm 4 and 1/2 years in remission. My aunt fell down some stairs or something in January 2011. It really wasn't serious at the time, we thought. Apparently her hips started not feeling right after that. She went to the doctor about it in the end of July-ish. She had cancer. It was everywhere. She was dead by September. You know, people can go fast sometimes, but we were not prepared for that. One night, I suddenly had serious stomach pains. After failing to sleep it off, my parents wanted me to stay home from school, but I declined for I had quizzes that day. I sat through US history, algebra 2, and even tried to eat lunch, still in agony. So, after finishing my English quiz, I waddled down to the office and called my mom to get me. At this point, the pain is so bad I can barely stand. So my mom takes me to the doctors. Turns out, my appendix was ready to explode. You should have waited a little bit longer. You would have felt a lot better. My mother was in town visiting for Christmas. Suddenly she was slurring her speech, acting belligerent, and all around confused. Tested her blood sugar and all it said was error. We get to the ER and she passed out. Her blood sugar was a 19. Her liver spontaneously failed. The best the doctors can guess is she caught a virus and it attacked her liver. 4 days after the onset she got a liver transplant. A 22-year-old woman in Baton Rouge, Louisiana gave my mother the ultimate gift. Please, become an organ donor. Please. 16yo here. Got my license like 3 weeks ago. Already an organ donor. My basic thinking is if I'm dead I don't need them anymore. You found my secret gold stash. Comment gold for me and you can have some, maybe. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.